most welcome to this dialogue series about the response that UNDP is developing as we lead technically on the socioeconomic response, but in close coordination with partners, of course, in countries, but also in the UN system and beyond. And one of the important areas of response, of course, and you would know that this is really an area close to the heart and in practical terms, work that we have been doing for many decades as United Nations Development Programme, that's the area of governance. And we will have the opportunity together with colleagues from our Policy Bureau, our Crisis Bureau, but also colleagues working in program countries to share some of the findings we've had as we develop this work. And we would very much like to have you also accompanying us in this, asking us questions in the chat function and being part of developing this. We pride ourselves to be the most transparent development agency of the UN system. And we very much believe in partnership and co-creation as we develop our response in these difficult times. Because as you are aware, COVID-19 has disrupted billions of lives and it has endangered our global economy. And we predict the deepest global recession since the Second World War and the broadest collapse in per capita income since 1870, and that is 5.2% contraction in global GDP in 2020. ILO, the International Labour Organization, expects that global workforce will be hit with the equivalent loss of more than 300 million jobs. And global human development, as we measure in the Human Development Report, is on course to decline this year for the first time since UNDP developed the concept and the measurement in 1990. UNDP has mobilized and continue to mobilize our full capacity and the capacity of the UN system through our 131 country teams serving 162 countries and territories to support national authorities in developing public health preparedness and response plan to the COVID-19 crisis. And we have positioned ourselves as a development organization that will lead the global response in a number of fronts in a very fast moving environment. And in order to do that in the right way, we need to think together and work together with others. We need to prepare, respond, and build not back, but build forward better and design a future that looks beyond recovery towards 2030. And this is how we have presented our second version of our response, our offer. We need to build forward, as I said. And in order to do that, we need to understand better the impact that we have seen and the need for socioeconomic assessments are guiding us and governments and partners on the risks and the consequences of a variety of policy, very difficult policy choices that countries have to make. As you are probably aware by now, UNDP was given the technical lead for the socioeconomic response, and our country offices worldwide are working under the leadership of the UN resident coordinators and in close collaboration with specialized agencies, the regional economic commissions, but also beyond the system, the development system, the IFIs, to assess the socioeconomic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on economies and communities. And you find our assessments on our website. We have prepared 170 of these socioeconomic assessments in 83 countries and 5 regions. And they, as you know by now, paint a devastating picture of the impact of the crisis. And I believe, and I know that you also are aware of, that this is only the beginning. Governments are preparing, responding and recovering in different stages, with UNDP increasingly asked how this pandemic and the crisis can lead to policies that prevent us from making mistakes of the past. We are all aware of the pre-COVID society and world. Our people and planet were already on an unsustainable path, and our COVID-19 response offer reflects the 4 thematic areas and policy considerations that we believe speak to our strengths and the expectations of partners to UNDP and our partners. And alongside with the need for strong social protection measures, as well as advanced digital solutions that we've had the possibility to discuss in earlier dialogues, the green economy to sustain people and the planet, we believe that effective institutions, governance, and rebuilding the social contract is one of the critical areas that we need to work with and improve. And it's the fourth and final component of our COVID response offer, as we have presented in these dialogues. Governance as an area of work is, of course, more important than ever, as governments come under pressure to navigate the crisis and uncertainty and deliver digitalized services, enable access to information and social protection, and function in a transparent and effective way. While the pandemic has created a global impact with regard to health and the deep economic crisis, these have been overlaid on what many were already perceiving as a broken and unsustainable system, working for the benefit of few at the expense of many. And the Secretary General has called for what he says a whole of government and whole of society approach to build back forward. And this is really also the way UNDP would want to work. Governments and civil society, of course, need to work together, need to seek new ways of working together to advance social cohesion, gender equality, while upholding human rights and rule of law, especially in fragile and conflict-affected contexts where justice and security concerns may be more acute. And UNDP is supporting partners in making choices that build social capital, that build trust, but also deliver inclusive services and open civic space to lay the foundation for the future. A new social contract fully reflective of people's agency that builds trust in institutions and closes the gap between people and the state and decision makers. UNDP governance and agency is manifold and includes, amongst so much more, supporting rule of law, human rights, and national and local government institutions to keep the doors open with e-governance, manage crisis and uncertainty, to tackle corruption and address misinformation, as you have seen that we've been doing all along the crisis. And to tell us more about this critical work of ours that is not just central to our COVID response, but also our broader strategic plan, as you know it, that UNDP has been offering over years and even decades, I'm happy to have my dear colleague Sarah Lister and her team with us. Sarah is head of governance in our policy bureau. But first, let me also pass on to another dear colleague, Asako Kai, director of UNDP's Crisis Bureau and part of our global policy network, for some opening words. Over to you, Asako.
Thank you, Lika, for kind introduction. Hello, everyone, wherever you are. It is great pleasure to be here today to highlight our work on governance and the response to global pandemic. As Achim Steiner, our administrator, put it, we are witnessing the biggest experiment in comparative governance the world has ever experienced. It means that how well countries are responding to COVID-19 relates to the strength of their institutions and governance systems, as well as the overall resilience of their respective social contracts. And countries are facing real challenges, such as contending interests, static power dynamics, a lack of clear and accurate information, unequal participation of the population, misdirected resources, and general unresponsive governance mechanisms. And we already see public frustrations in many contexts due to worsened inequalities, weakness in the delivery of public services, and structural barriers that impede access to them. We see the disproportionate effects on certain communities, that rise of hate speeches as well. And we also see systematically weak judiciary systems limiting the protection of human rights, access to justice for all. So the context of the COVID-19 pandemics laid bare the case for the improved governance and social cohesion. But this is exactly why the response of the COVID-19 is also an opportunity for us all to reframe the ways that we support national and local governance system and foster social cohesion. The governance area is already UNDP's one of the largest portfolios and only next to poverty eradication and at the heart of its mandate. And building on this expertise, we decided to attach a renewed focus on the social contract between the states and population. UNDP is exploring ways to support more inclusive social contract as a means of expanding civic space, restoring trust, and closing the gap between institutions and the people they represent. These challenges provide renewed development opportunities for support to national systems and public policies to factor in the needs and voices of civil society and the informal sector in particular. We have learned many lessons from disease outbreak and pandemics of the past. We know it works when solutions are developed locally with strong national ownership. We know that responses must be driven by solidarity and science, and that we need to include the whole of government and whole of society in an integrated way, as the Secretary General had pointed out, if we are to safeguard human rights as well as to protect the most vulnerable people. As a trusted partner at both national and local levels that we aspire to be, we intend to leverage this position to push for a transformative governance with more inclusive and accountable processes, upholding the rights and normative framework that our mandate is built on. As an integrator in the UN system, we will leverage our partnerships and cross-pillar collaboration to support coherent approaches. We firmly believe that efforts to address COVID-related impact on governance and human rights will be important building blocks and the tipping point in the long term beyond the ongoing outbreak, beyond recovery toward 2030. So targeted investment by partners are urgently needed to ensure that UNDP can expand and deepen our country office support. We hope to provide some clear examples today to garner your understanding and support for that. So with this, I will now hand over to Sarah Lister, our head of governance, to give you more detail about our governance offer. Thank you very much, and over to you, Sarah.
Thank you very much, Asako and Ulrika, and good morning, Excellencies and colleagues. I see a number of old friends and colleagues online, and it's good to have an opportunity to share this material with you this morning. I'm going to take you through to just before the hour, whichever time zone you're in, and also provide some country examples to help ground our discussion this morning in what our COVID governance offer looks like in the many countries in which we serve. But before I do, I'm just going to make a couple of opening remarks, a little bit of further framing for the discussion. Please do feel free to write in the chat box comments and questions. I'm hoping that before we close, we'll have a chance to open up and respond to some of those. So as Asako mentioned, while there are so many challenges we see, there are also some opportunities, also in the governance sphere, despite the many challenges. And in our governance work, we are supporting our partners to make the choices that build inclusive social contracts, that are reflective of people's agency, that build trust in governance systems, and that close the gap between people and the state, and ensure also the provision of the public goods that countries and societies and that the world needs. And that also includes the apocalyptic climate crisis that we're facing. It is when we get our governance systems functioning better that we can also begin to make progress on some of these issues. So as Ulrika mentioned, the Secretary General also noted recently in an important speech this need to build a new social contract. He noted people want social and economic systems that work for everyone. They want their human rights and fundamental freedoms to be respected. They want a say in decisions that affect their lives. The new social contract between governments, peoples, civil society, businesses, and more must integrate employment, sustainable development, and social protection based on equal rights and opportunities for all. As he elaborated in that quote there, a social contract will look different in different places, but at its heart, it is the equilibrium between different forces and interests in society, not just states and people. And governance systems are the processes that allow for the balancing of those interests, rights, and obligations of individuals and different groups within societies. So through its governance work, UNDP is supporting that balancing at different levels, helping to ensure that those whose interests are often undervalued are taken into account and strengthening their voices and their agency. In practical terms, this looks like many different interventions in different contexts, and that is why it is hard to present in just a few minutes the breadth and the depth of our governance work. But if I can have the next slide, please. This is just one attempt to illustrate some of the COVID-19 related governance interventions we have been engaged with across all regions in the last 6 months, and before that, but particularly in the COVID context. And we will continue to work with these different aspects and more in different combinations and different configurations as we support national partners to deal with the particular configuration of challenges that they face. It may be a little bit small for you to see the different words. The point is not necessarily all the words that are there, but the fact that we seek to provide support to governance systems in different contexts, and that may require a variety of different interventions in different contexts. So while our programming comes together in different ways in broad terms, we do work with a range of partners to support national and local government institutions to keep their doors open and deliver services in an equitable and inclusive manner, including through employing digital solutions. And we've seen the importance of that very much in recent months. We also work in partnership to strengthen the transparency, accountability, and responsiveness of governance systems at all levels. And that means maintaining checks and balances, including through democratic oversight, ensuring access to trusted information, and promoting the active participation of people. We also work on safeguarding human rights and protection and upholding the rule of law. And one of the examples we will hear in a few minutes speaks very much to that. And we also work on maintaining the momentum of conflict prevention and peaceful transitions, which includes support to social cohesion as part of our ongoing efforts to advance joint humanitarian development and peace results in fragile contexts. And we work with a variety of partners within the UN peacebuilding architecture on that, including OCHA, the World Bank, and many others. Of course, we don't have, in the next 40 minutes, time to talk about all of those aspects. And indeed, we hope that we might have a session before too long, similar to this, to go into some of the conflict prevention, social cohesion, and other themes that surely merit our time to discuss in more depth. But we're going to turn now to examples of a couple of countries and talk to the resident representatives in those countries about how this broad governance offer actually looks, what it looks like in countries as we start to work with our partners to try to address the many challenges there are. So if I might have the video, please, that explains our work, aspects of our work in Kyrgyzstan.
Measures in Kyrgyzstan have dramatically restricted the access of vulnerable groups to legal and psychological assistance. Courts, crisis centers, and safe sites for domestic violence survivors have reduced their work. Meanwhile, the number of domestic violence cases increased by 65%. To tackle the problem, UNDP has adopted a three-pronged strategy that is directed at main stakeholders, pro bono lawyers, private enterprises, and IT developers. The main goal of the strategy is to provide access to justice, as well as support and employment services. UNDP has partnered with ministries of justice and emergency situations to introduce legal consultations through 112 hotline.
На май месяц всего звонков поступило 205. Мы выявили, что большое количество обратившихся – это женщины. И у нас поступало несколько звонков, связанных с семейным насилием.
UNDP has helped Bar Association and Network of Private Lawyers since 2016 by providing free legal assistance to SGDV survivors and help them to adjust to remote and online support during lockdown.
У нас работает команда пробона, Это консультанты, которые оказывают безвозмездную помощь жертвам семейного насилия. И сначала с ними работают психологи, потом с ними работают юристы. Только потом я принимаю за работу как бизнес-консультант.
It is from social media that human rights defenders have learned about Alina's story. Her brother's Facebook post helped to publicly reveal constant abuse from her husband.
Позвонил, получается, мужу сестры, так как у нее телефона не было. Трубку взял не он, а сестра моя. Аман, помоги мне, помоги. Он меня бьет, он всегда меня бьет. Мы забрали к себе.
Мой муж вот мне говорил то, что он у меня детей отберет, то, что я без ничего останусь. И вот это вот меня и пугало.
Pro bono lawyers provided legal assistance, representing her in a court. Alina's husband was punished for domestic violence by Article 75 on Misdemeanor Code and paid 60,000 Kyrgyzstan's fine, which is equivalent to $780. Alina got divorced from her abusing husband and kept her children with her. She got a professional support from a psychologist of pro bono team.
Моя задача – это чтобы они стали финансово независимыми. Это можно сделать при помощи работы либо своего бизнеса. И Элина, она смогла открыть свой бизнес.
И он мне предложил: Элина, вот как ты думаешь, ты вот умеешь варенье делать? И мне сразу же эта идея понравилась, и начали этот маленький бизнес наш семейный. Уверенность появилась, во-первых, и я начала улыбаться наконец.
To mitigate the negative impact of lockdown on vulnerable groups, UNDP, in partnership with UNICEF, conducted an online hackathon. It was attended by IT developers, designers, and crisis center representatives. The project to win the contest was a Telegram chatbot that helped recognize violence.
Telegram-бот состоит из теста, который вот определяет насилие, отправляет все кризисные центры, всех психологов, которые могут помочь. Он находит регион, в котором вы находитесь, отправляет центры, которые в нашем регионе.
During the pandemic, government agencies, private lawyers, business people, and IT developers came together to protect girls and women from violence. UNDP is determined to keep focus on new technologies and cooperating with broad range of partners in its commitment to support vulnerable groups.
Thank you, and I'd like to invite Louise Chamberlain, who is UNDP's resident representative in Kyrgyzstan, to join me now for a discussion on both that very interesting initiative and other governance and social contract related issues in Kyrgyzstan. And in a few minutes, we will be joined by the resident representative from the Dominican Republic as well to talk about the situation in that country. So Louise, this is a really interesting example of how UNDP can engage private legal professionals, businesses and tech companies to fulfill their professional and social responsibility in addressing those unmet needs of victims of domestic violence. So it would be really helpful to have a discussion this morning about how UNDP can help build those partnerships further. What were the key incentives that your project used to promote engagement of private lawyers in pro bono work and in assisting the women affected by violence?
Thanks, Sarah, and thanks for the opportunity to present our work here in this forum. I think the most important thing to say is that we had the opportunity to leverage this particular platform because of the work that we have been doing on legal aid services in Kyrgyzstan since 2016. So we had already a platform for pro bono legal aid and working with a number of lawyers through the Advocatura and the Bar Association. And we have also been providing services around the country in this bus for solidarity that goes to rural areas to inform local people about their legal rights, really, and provide opportunities for settlement of all kinds of disputes. So what we had that opportunity to extend that to gender-based violence, and through the Advocatura and the Bar Association, there is an existing training program. So one of the incentives, if you will, was the opportunity to access training in a new field of work, namely gender-based, sexual and gender-based violence. Another important point was, I think, the sense of progress. This was an area where when all of these cases have become really high profile, and they have enabled practitioners in the field, legal practitioners, to advance new legislation and new decision-making procedure, new tools for the police to act against perpetrators of gender-based violence. So I think many lawyers felt motivated to work in this area because of this ability to make progress. A third issue is also the recognition and visibility that comes with that. If you're a high-profile lawyer, it gives great visibility. All of the cases that have gone forward to court have received a lot of public attention, and that, I think, speaks also to the need for using the legal process to raise awareness about women's situation and the kinds of horrible crimes that women are actually subjected to in many cases in their own home. Let's bear in mind that the number of cases in Kyrgyzstan that were reported during the first part of this year was an increase by 65% compared to the same period last year. So it gives recognition and visibility both to the issues and to the people who are also assisting the solution, and for the lawyers it's obviously attractive. And then the last and not unimportant issue, I think, the spirit of volunteerism. Many people feel very strongly about this cause, and there is a very strong civil society activist culture in Kyrgyzstan that really speaks to this. And I think in that spirit also many private practitioners felt that they could make a genuine contribution.
Thank you. As you noted, not just in Kyrgyzstan, but we know that globally, the issue of GBV during the pandemic has been one of the most serious or very serious outcome that we've seen everywhere. And so it's good to see an example of where it's been help and support to address that. And I thought it was also interesting that you mentioned that it was an existing legal platform that you were able to build on to expand into this area. As I talk to our colleagues from around the world, I've heard that consistently. It's actually the work that we've been doing for, in some places, years, in some places, decades, that have provided the partnerships, the platforms, the networks that have enabled us to scale up in our COVID response globally. What has been your experience of engaging with the tech sector in this work and developing the web and mobile solutions that will assist the women and children, some of whom we saw on that video? Because I know many of us in various different governance areas are increasingly working in this with mobile, with digital. There are also concerns about digital inequalities and so forth. But what was your experience in Kyrgyzstan?
Look, I think the last, I want to just mention very briefly, the last point you mentioned, there is an issue of digital divide, obviously. And so it's important that the solutions are quite simple. But most people in Kyrgyzstan have access to a mobile phone and some level of even basic smartphone. And the government, and again, coming back to the point on building on existing platform, the government has been very proactive and has a very strong digitalization agenda that UNDP is also very actively involved with. So we have a very strong partnership with the State ICT Committee. And with this committee, we sort of composed a task force and created a digital platform for online work. Because, of course, in Kyrgyzstan, as in many other countries, there was this recognition that we need more digital solutions now that government offices are closing. And for that matter, many services also closed because government officials became ill during the height of the crisis. So that digital task force really came up with a number of different digital solutions. And on that platform, we could then connect them to also gender experts and to start thinking what we could do. And we specifically, as we heard in the video also, organized this hackathon where we had, I think, about 53 developers in one room. They came up with about 18 solutions, and 3 of them were taken forward, including the service that we saw in the video, where women can basically type in, this is what's happening to me, and the chatbot will, based on the types of responses given, say, look, you have a problem, and here are some suggestions. There's also, and the other solution that we're pursuing is also one where those who are willing to help can look up who actually is out there and is looking for help right now, so kind of a connecting platform. So
Thank you.
great opportunities. And I wanted to also say that we've got a small but very, very energetic ICT entrepreneurship community.
That's great. And I noticed also, before I bring in Inka to join the discussion and talk about the context in the Dominican Republic also, I noticed in your first answer, you talked about almost some of the spillover effects, you know, the future that there's now starting to see changes in regulations and laws, both in the past and ongoing. So how do you plan to build further on the partnership and alliance with these different actors, the lawyers, the businesses, the IT companies, so that they can continue to contribute along with the state-funded justice institutions to improving access to justice in Kyrgyzstan?
Well, I think the first thing is that it's going to continue to require a bit of nurture. One, not least, because after the COVID crisis, the state finances have taken a severe hit, and we've got a big crunch on all state-funded initiatives. So to sustain funding for these initiatives will be really important for years to come, if we're looking at from ODA contributions. And we're very lucky to have the EU-funded Spotlight initiative. We're building on that to also strengthen institutional capacity of there's an association of crisis centers that actually has the coordination response of this multidisciplinary response to SGBV, where it's not only the legal aid, but also psychosocial support and income generating activities. And so we're going to continue supporting that together with the Minister of Justice, who can also foster joint solutions with the private sector.
Thank you. Don't go away, because we'll want to bring you back in. Don't go anywhere. But I'd like to invite Inka Matila to join us. She is UNDP's resident representative in the Dominican Republic. And perhaps before I start asking you some questions about the various initiatives, could you give us a few minutes or a few words of background for those who are on the call and are not so familiar with the context in which you work?
Thank you, and thank you for this invitation, Your Excellencies, colleagues around the world. Good morning from Dominican Republic. Dominican Republic is one of the small state islands shared in Hispaniola Island together with Haiti, a country with quite different characteristics as Dominican Republic. Dominican Republic is considered also one of the 15 most vulnerable countries towards climate shocks and climate-based crises in the world. On the economic and social side, Dominican Republic is one of the countries which has been growing fastest in the Latin America and the Caribbean region in the past 10 years, over 5% every year. So basically, there's also considerable advances in social terms. For example, many of the Millennium Development Goals were achieved. Besides of these kind of some good advances, there's a huge inequalities still persisting in the country, as in many Latin American countries. And also the whole issue of governance, transparency, and the functioning of the institution is one of the key challenges. So basically, and we also face a particular moment, in addition to the profound impact, social and economic impacts of the crisis, of the COVID crisis. We are also in the middle of electoral year. So in March, we had elections and the new local authorities took office, and August 16, just a couple of weeks ago, the new central government took office. And it's a huge transition, because basically it's the main opposition party that takes the office after 16 years in opposition. So these are some of the characteristics of Dominican Republic. And in addition to this COVID crisis, the electoral transition, we are also in the hurricane and tropical storm season. So we are definitely not lacking of challenges at this moment.
Yes, thank you. I wanted you to explain to the colleagues online, because it's these multiple crises and these multiple aspects that provide such a challenge very often, but that UNDP typically supports across a range of issues at the same time. So particularly in the context of a democratic transition, what innovative methodologies did UNDP use to support that democratic transition in the complicated context that you've laid out for us?
Thank you, Sarah, for the question. And actually, I want to share with you something we are quite proud of, because basically many of the different actors of the society, from civil society organizations, private sector actors, even the actors from the whole, both sides of the living governments and the incoming governments, they contacted us after the election results came out, and basically came to UNDP and asked our support, basically to keep the country running in this very complex situation. So basically what we very fast did in case of Dominican Republic, we kind of also wanted to bring the best out of UNDP at global and regional level. We have very consolidated experience at the regional level in UNDP for Latin American and Caribbean of methodological and systemic support for different public administration and development of institutions. These are called so-called CIGOP methodologies and systems. And basically, it's for me, for example, personally, it's one of the best examples of incremental innovation we have in the organization. Something that we have been testing for years, and we are talking about here more than 20 years of development of understanding how we can support the public administration processes from the regional context, knowing the realities and starting from these realities and not from ideal utopia, ideal situation. So basically what we very fast did is we gather up an expert team from our regional colleagues, from our UNDP country office, and we also invited some of the other UN agencies to join this task force. And basically only in 4 weeks, we managed kind of do this kind of empalme, or kind of like lapping up process, where we conducted all virtual through Zoom meetings, over 120 interviews with 22 institutions of the country to understand what are the key products, the processes, the contracts, the people that are already existing in the institutional setup, and how these.
Colleagues, if you are online and not muted, please do so.
Okay.
Inka,
so
go ahead.
all what you find in the institutional setup, how it kind of matches with the main priorities of the new government. So basically, this is something we are quite proud of, because it really in a very concrete terms kind of put all the knowledge of the institutional setup in serve of the government and the new staff that are taking the office these days. In addition, there's one novelty that I also want to point out. We also took advantage of this process. And basically, as we know that the COVID situation, the pandemic situation is very, very important. Basically, the government before had quite consolidated database of the actions they had been taking. They had been identified like 250 different kind of actions. But during these interviews and this data collection we did in only 4 weeks, we managed to almost duplicate the identification of the different means, concrete means the government, not only from the health sector, but also from the other institutions are putting in place. So basically, and we didn't elaborate any reports, we didn't consume any paper. All of this is available in online platform that kind of allows for easy access and different kind of matching of the data, according to the priorities, according to the institutions, and really helps to the new government to set up the plan for the first 100 days based on the advances and also the challenges that were already existing in the institutions when they took office.
Thank you. I think that's a really good example of similar to Kyrgyzstan, of the existing relationships and in your case particularly decades of UNDP experience with certain methodologies and approaches, which are then brought together with new technologies, new approaches to enable a really innovative approach to supporting national partners. But in this context of transition and with so many challenges, how do you transition cooperation projects with a new government? What did that process look like?
That's an excellent question, Sarah. I think it's important that we basically have been that we are basing, not only in Dominican Republic, but in all the countries, as Ulrika also mentioned, in very solid analysis. So basically, and this analysis that we are jointly doing, most of the cases with other UN agencies, basically set the basis to understand where are the key issues that we need to tackle as UNDP, that we can have added value. And basically, rather than talking about projects, I really like to talk about portfolios and like these priority strategies. So basically, what we have been doing in case of Dominican Republic, we have been really challenging ourselves as organization, as team, and trying to really get out of these out-of-the-box solutions, because we are in abnormal, not normal situation at this moment. So the old recipes are not going to work. So basically, I think based on these very solid and rigorous analysis, for example, we have implemented real-time data system that we are calling Red Actua Network, that basically every 2 months we are taking a zoom on the most vulnerable households. We are doing these polls to over 6,000 households in the country to understand what is really actually happening at household level, what is really happening among the most vulnerable people. So basically this kind of like very solid analytical work also opened the doors to start the dialogue based on evidence and analysis. Basically what we also did before the new government took office, we kind of did a match of their priorities expressed on the government plan and what we have been doing. So also in the same way, we kind of supported the leading government and the ongoing processes and products in the public administration. We did something quite similar with our program portfolio. It is also important to kind of put emphasis that since the beginning of the pandemic, we did profound revision of our program portfolio and readjusted it also that it really is relevant and timely for the COVID challenges. So in this context, I want to basically mention one example that is actually something that just came out. Even before COVID, we had been working with Ministry of Education on quite ambitious digitalization strategy that basically we had been supporting training to the teachers. We came up, or we are coming up of training of teachers and docents, and at the moment we have some 60,000 teachers trained on the digital devices and digital learning methodologies. So basically this was work we already had started before the pandemic. This obviously was very, very much needed when the pandemic came out. And this Monday we signed new memorandum of understanding of the incoming government with the new government to basically support together with UNICEF this whole process that basically only in 2.5 months they need to adjust the whole methods of how to get the children back to school, because basically from our analysis what we noticed that 15% of the kids were not able to attend the schools when in the first months of the pandemic. So we are now taking up this huge challenge. Basically, it means we will support also the procurement of a large amount of technical devices, but not only this operational side. We are also combining and strengthening the training on digital training and teaching methods. UNICEF is doing fantastic work with the content and the curricula in this space. And we are also supporting the government to have these negotiations with private sector actors to assure that we can overcome the huge challenge we have with the connectivity in the country. In case of Dominican Republic, less than 30% of the population have actually access to internet. So basically what people did so far, they were connecting basically with their smartphones to the classes during the first months of the pandemic in Dominican Republic. So the key issue over here is adapt and respond to the priorities based on solid evidence and good analysis.
That's great, thank you. Before I ask you one final question, I would just like to remind colleagues that the chat box is open. We should have around 5-8 minutes for response to questions and answers, so please put them there. But finally, Inka, much of the discussion has been around national partnerships this morning, but how have you supported local government institutions also to keep their doors open and build confidence with the people?
Thank you for the question. Basically, we have it's kind of lovely example we have with Santo Domingo, with the capital of Dominican Republic. Dominican Republic was chosen to be one of the 5 pilots worldwide in 2019 to see how digital solutions can promote our internal processes and our programmatic work. So basically what we wanted to start to pilot in Dominican Republic is exactly how we can put technology in use to build the trust between the citizenship and the institutions. And we applied this digital lighthouse initiative to the Santo Domingo local government, the capital. And basically when we had been planning kind of these integral solutions with web-based application that doesn't consume a lot of data, that is also kind of accessible for the barrios populares, for the popular neighborhoods in the capital. So basically, again, based on the conceptualization, how we can build trust and improve the interaction between the citizenship and the local government, we had something quite nice already developed when the pandemic hit the country. So basically, and this also was coincident with the change of the local government. So basically, what we did with the new mayor, and we have female mayor finally in the country, so that's also very very important aspect. So basically, we presented this initiative, Digital Lighthouse Initiative, as a part of our wider strategy to support the institutional strengthening of the administration of the local government, both from the offer side and also from the demand side, from the capitaleños and capitaleñas, the citizenship of the capital. So basically, she bought this application immediately in, said that she really wants this to be basically the main communication channel with the capitaleños and capitaleñas, with the people living in Santo Domingo. And we started to develop new kind of modules for this application that basically also allow for the people in the neighborhoods to interact, to offer their solidarity, to kind of have these virtual solidarity-based applications, and also serve as a channel of the agreements the mayor's office is doing with the neighborhood neighborhood committees. So this is something that we are quite proud of at this moment, basically because it really hits one of the main challenges we are facing, not only in Dominican Republic, but in the whole region of Latin America and the Caribbean, which is the distrust that the people have towards who are governing, towards the public institution, both at local and central national levels.
Thank you very much. I see a couple of questions coming in the chat box. I think we will take a couple of those in a minute. I see one on the Sahel, I see one on the UN architecture and so forth, and a comment on the Dominican Republic from our colleague in the Panama Regional Hub, who knows the case very well. Before I perhaps address some of those and pass maybe to Ulrika and Asako, who may wish to comment in their wrap-up on those issues as well. I'd like to ask both of you, actually. I think we've heard a lot about how existing work, existing relationships, existing partnerships were able to be scaled up and applied with, meshed with new technology, new approaches and so forth. So both Louise and Inka, what have been your main important lessons from your experience at this time? And I know both of you are still, I'm sure 20 hours a day, heavily involved in the day-to-day, crisis-related management and so forth. But as we look forward, look at building forward and so forth, what are your key thoughts about the lessons that you've learned from UNDP's response on governance to date, and what you might want to take forward when you have a chance to develop in other areas? Maybe I'll turn to Louise first.
Well, thanks for that question, Sarah. And I suppose so. For us, what we saw most generally in Kyrgyzstan at the early part of the response was how vulnerable people became overnight, and how when I think one of the key consequences of the economic crisis in the region has been, as I mentioned earlier, that the loss of revenue to the state budget. So the economic situation is quite severe also for the government. And so there is a sense in the general public that the government is not doing anything. Where is all the money going that's coming in aid resources? And as a matter of fact, much of that budget support is coming to simply finance existing commitments and to rescue enterprises from further collapse and people losing jobs. So I would say that there's a huge need for social dialogue, for in the context of what we call as UNDP, this new social contract. There's really a need for public dialogue about transparency around the use of state resources and aid resources, but also a need for refocusing on addressing issues of equality. So many people have lost their jobs, have lost their only family income, and many of them also are unable to regenerate themselves in the short term. We are trying through various digital solutions to create new job offers and new ways for people to engage. But I think it's important to also generate credibility that the state is actually trying to help people, that there is more discussion on this in the public sphere.
Thank you. Maybe Inka, just in 30 seconds or a minute, your response to that, and I will make a couple of wrap-up comments and hand back to Asako and Ulrika to close.
Thank you, Sarah. There's so many lessons learned. In difficult, complex times, you always learned a lot. But basically, I think there's one issue which is exactly the theme of today, the centrality of the governance. We are facing health crises, we are facing socio-economic crises, but we are also facing governance crises. And I want to echo what Louise said about the whole issue of the dialogue spaces, how to build up on the confidence. And this is especially important in case of Dominican Republic, where the citizenship have huge expectations towards the new government that is taking office in almost impossible times. So basically how we can support that. And I think one of the key takeaways, in addition to understand that we are in front of very uncertain context, basically we don't have the bola de cristal, the crystal ball to really predict. So basically we really need to put a lot of emphasis to analysis, to set up data, to have real-time analysis, and try to understand how also the people are changing. We are in the middle of profound transformations. So probably the kind of impacts that normally we see in 5 or 10 years, they are really accelerating at this moment. So how we can also find the opportunities in this type of context. And one of the key issues I want to put on the table, Sarah, is that we cannot lose in sight on this on this tremendous, hectic context we have, the medium and the long-term perspective. This is something that is quite important, and also the kind of understanding that the decision in terms of public policies that are taking that we are taking or promoting or advising at this moment, they will define also the how profound the social, economic, and also the governance effect of the pandemic will be.
Okay, thank you very much. I realise that the clock is ticking, and we've been asked a question about the UN architecture and the PBC in relation to strengthening of institutions, and the question was, what could member states and the intergovernmental architecture such as the PBC do to support UN system efforts in strengthening institutions and so forth. I mean, on that question, our administrator has spoken recently about it, that we do need to be frank about the chronic, recurrent and emergent issues of inconsistent investment, particularly on Goal 16. And I think the HLPF last year highlighted that there remained significant funding gaps on this, and we also continue to be challenged on integrated responses on the ground. So particularly at these times of challenge and transition, we need reliable funding and financing on this issue. And we also need to strengthen our partnerships. I mean, both colleagues today talked about the UN system working as a whole, the partnerships that we have on the ground. Including partnerships with, we haven't talked about today, but the DPPA on core governance functions and so forth. So Ulrika and Asaka may wish to add on that. And just before I close, there was a question also on the Sahel and what this looks like in the Sahel, if I understood the question correctly. I think, as we've seen, that the context is so different, even between Kyrgyzstan and the Dominican Republic. But some of the core aspects of strengthening governance systems to support the social contract and that debate and that dialogue around balancing the interests and the rights and the responsibilities of different actors is relevant in whichever country. And so that will play itself out in the context of the Sahel offer with different aspects. If you remember that word cloud that I showed at the beginning in terms of our governance offer, there will be different pieces that come together in different ways to support that balancing of rights and interests at the country level. And I'm very sorry that I've gone slightly over time. Hand you over to Asaka for a brief wrap-up.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Louise, Inka, and then all the participants for the listening into this conversation. I would just follow up on the questions from Caspar and the Japan, Hiroko, on that issues, and then try to close explaining moving forward. As Sarah had highlighted, this fragile context requires particular attention, and then the governance offer in Sahel is the one that we've been working on. Because of COVID, there's a bit of a delay in putting together as a whole, but it's now coming together with the technical support support from the Crisis Bureau and so forth. Hope that together with the other contexts in fragility, which has the particular challenges on governance, we hope to have a separate session to explain more in detail. So stay tuned on that. And on the question of the institution building, it's the Ahim statement had mentioned, as the Sarah said. But what we can do is that to enhance cohesiveness in our approach, joined up the analysis, joined up programming, coordination, and then stronger partnerships to invest cohesively in longer term in the governance is a must. The national ownership and strengthening inclusive institutions and governance must be at the heart of building back better, or rather build forward better toward 2030, and then we hope to bring the good practice in. So going forward in the coming weeks, UNDP will be launching consultation on how our governance work respond to the many challenges and opportunities we see, and explore a diversity of contemporary governance themes, including digital governance, trust, media, and governance, multi-level governance, including national level and sub-regional level, and so forth. So we warmly invite you to participate in the various external and internal events and discussion hosted on the UNDP Spark Blue platform. By that time, I hope you got familiarized with this Spark Blue platform. And we look forward to continuing to work with you all on these challenges, sharing lessons and developing new innovative governance mechanisms to address some of the most challenging problems we need to address. So this is on the clock. So now back over to Ulrika for final conclusion remarks. Please, over to you, Ulrika.
Thank you, Asako. And I will be very brief as we have passed time, and we, as I said in the beginning, try to have brief sessions. There are, of course, a lot of interesting things that we could discuss in detail, how this interprets in many different contexts. Sahel, of course, being of great interest to many of our partners. And Casper, greetings also from Copenhagen, where I am right now, where we've had the possibility also to discuss how to also share some ideas with regard to this. So look at this as an opportunity to get curious, and we are always ready also to engage with you bilaterally if needed, and to develop these concepts, sharing with you our ideas, but also really getting your good questions and suggestions to improve our ways of working. Next opportunity will be on Wednesday, 2nd of September at 8 a.m. when we will explore much further how we can help governments to finance the overall COVID response for the long term in a session that we call Financing the SDGs and COVID-19 Recovery. And it will be led by Marcus Netto, who is our director and colleague leading our finance sector hub. And we know that this topic is incredibly important, as has been mentioned also in this session. So please welcome and join us and be part of finding solutions together with us and the partners in the UN system and beyond. Financing for sustainable development beyond recovery towards 2030, 2nd of September at 8 a.m. Hope to see you then, and thank you so much for joining us. Thank you. Bye-bye.